Rammstein's songs are heavy, powerful and relentless, and in no way could their shows be described as small-scale or intimate. They are anthemic and appeal to the mass rather than the individual.
Rammstein did do something different. They were different, they sounded different, they presented themselves different. They presented themselves almost as an art project, which, in a very vague sense, had something to do with music.
Metaphors of totalitarianism, brutality and megalomania are often used to describe the band, and they seem to fetishize the power and control inherent in music at the turn of the century.
The chemistry of them, getting together in a rehearsal room or getting together on stage creates this kind of like really powerful music.
Rammstein are deliberately provocative. They see it as artists to say the unspeakable, to explore forbidden themes, and to get us to consider our own darkest faults, fears and fantasies.
And here you have these East Germans, Rammstein, coming over into the Western world and saying, baby, we're going to give it to you and we're going to give it to you guys real good. And they're coming with all this power and this aggressive guitars and heavy metal guitar sound and stuff like that. And their job is actually being done. They've done it. They grabbed you by the balls and you're going into the MTV and saying, look at these guys, and you're talking about them. The job is done, folks. The job is done.
All were trapped in the political system they'd been brought into. One where the books you could read, the films you could see, and the music you could hear were all strictly controlled. Yet they all had one thing in common: the desire to make music. All 6 members of Rammstein grew up in what was then the Communist German Democratic Republic. The members of Rammstein had once belonged to bands that were part of a semi-legal underground network of shadowy rehearsal rooms, one-off squat venues and badly recorded cassette albums. Vocalist Till Lindemann, born in Leipzig in 1963, started drumming in the band First Arsch in the North German town Schwerin before he gravitated towards Berlin. Paul Landers, born in Berlin in 1964, was in the band Die Firma with drummer Christoph Schneider, born the same year. Richard Krusper, meanwhile, was playing in a group called Orgasm Death Gimmick and came from Schwerin. Flaka Lorenz's experience was typical of the group. Every night when he finished work, he would go straight to rehearse with his band, Feeling B, where he played alongside Paul Landers. The youngest, bass player Oliver Riedel, also came from Schwerin, and before taking his place in Rammstein, performed in the famous East German band, the Inchotoctables. In 1992, Flaka and Paul remained in Feeling B, while Schneider moved on to join Richard, Till and Ollie. Ollie had been in the successful band, the Inchotoctables, and friends were amazed that he'd given up playing to crowds of thousands to joining an unknown band. Robert Beckman was with Ollie in the Inchotoctables at the time.
Ollie came to the band and he said from the first day on, I will stay only 1 year. I like your music, but it's not a kind of style I want to play. So we said, okay, no problem. We wanted to hold him in the band, of course, because he was a good bass player, he was a good friend, was a good buddy, and so we wanted to hold him, but he said, no, not my stuff, I want to play in a band which is doing harder music. After that, I don't know, some month later, Rammstein was founded, and that's the music he likes and he's feeling good with. And so he left the band after, I think, 14 or 15 months.
However, it wasn't long before the four got noticed when they won a Berlin competition for inexperienced bands. Shortly, the fifth to join was Paul, who was persuaded to be the frontman and do vocals. And then soon after, Flaka joined the ranks. By the end of 1992, the band had finally formed and began rehearsing together. In 1995, they completed their first demo. Emu, their manager, set up their first record deal, which they recorded at Stockholm's Polar Studio with Swedish producer Jacob Hellner. Arditya Sharma from Berlin's Fritz Radio was attributed to breaking the band by playing their music in high rotation on one of Germany's major radio stations.
When I first heard of Rammstein, it must have been in the spring of 1995, where a colleague of mine who knew the band personally gave me a DAT of these friends of his who played in a band called Rammstein, and they had played their first gigs, and this DAT was supposed to be on their first album. And my first reaction was that it was a very odd band name, because it's almost quite ugly to call yourself after such a macabre incident where two planes crashed together, landed in an audience and about 80 people died. But the sound on the DAT was very different. It was neo-industrial. It was definitely something that popped out. And the whole aura of the band certainly sprung out, because I had heard from Jens about the few live performances they'd given. And I thought to myself, they're definitely not like the other bands. I remember playing the first song of the first album in August of 1995 on the show. And I got a few phone calls straight after that by listeners who wanted to know what the band was. And I don't want to blow my own trumpet here, but I remember that the first thing I said about Rammstein on air was that this was programmed to be controversial from the start, and that's exactly how it came.
Their first single was Du riechst so gut, You Smell So Good, released in 1995 on Motor Music. The single was enough of a success for Motor to release Rammstein's first album, Herzeleid, Heartache. René Otto, a rock journalist, has regularly interviewed and written about the band.
Their first album, Herzeleid, includes several really good songs. In the beginning, Wollt ihr das Bett in Flammen sehen? Then Seemann was a very impressive ballad, and the last song, Rammstein, itself is a really good end for a record. I can say that there's no song on this album which is on a low level of songwriting. There are elements of true German music in it. The straight music sounds very German without a connection to the old Germany before 45.
Nobody was interested in the album when it first came out. It's a remarkable story, because the album came out and only through word of mouth did people actually discover that this band existed at all. In fact, I would imagine that it holds certain records, because I think it only entered the German charts about 7 months after it was released. Nobody wanted to have anything to do with this band initially, and when it came out, it was this very tight, staccato, industrial metal, riff-oriented style of music that many German bands actually didn't have the guts to produce, because there was this very Germanness to the whole thing. You know, they were on the cover with no shirts on. There was this very manly undertone, and also with the style of singing that Till actually goes after. There was so much room for controversy, and so much room almost for Germans to pick up on certain aspects of their history that they actually hadn't, gone through in a certain way. I know that they were keen to create a certain heaviness that had nothing to do with speed, but had to do with riffs and emotions almost. And it worked, because their lyrics are quite deep, although many people don't think they are. They often talk about things at a very surface level, but if you take the album as a whole, or if you actually, as a listener, take the time to fantasize about certain aspects of what they're singing about, you can actually get quite a kick out of it. And it's not only